Defense attorneys, what is it like having an obviously guilty client? I took the appointment because the public defender's office was drowning, and the calendar had my name on a red square. The file was thin and loud in the way bad evidence is loud. Photographs that refused to be interpreted kindly, a confession that read like a resignation letter, a surveillance clip with the defendant's face in the middle of the frame and nothing else to look at. The Neighborhood Watch had already written the verdict and stapled it to a bulletin board. My role was to be the person who opened the courtroom door for someone the world had already decided to shut out. His name was Darren, and he smelled like old cigarettes and rainwater. He sat with his head down for the first hour, and then raised his eyes to me as if asking whether adversarial systems ever felt human. He admitted what everyone else suspected without theatricality or attempt at performance. The admission arrived like a sentence in plain font. It did not surprise me. It unsettled me in a way that had nothing to do with law and everything to do with the inventory of small tragedies people carry inside a body. Defense work seldom looks like the movies in moments like that. The work is small, patient, and sometimes painfully mundane. It is filling forms that read like ritual and calling witnesses whose names mean nothing beyond a fact on a spreadsheet. It is negotiating with sworn certainty across a hallway and trying to find an arrangement that acknowledges guilt without destroying whatever remains of a person's life that matters to the people who depend on them. There are no revelations that absolve or condemn. There is only consequence management, which is a sterile way of saying that my job was to make a future less ruinous. I learned who Darren was outside the line items of the police report. He had once taught a kid to ride a bicycle on gravel and laughed when the kid fell. He had a brother who left voicemails that began with small talk and ended in apologies. He kept a dog that slept at the foot of his bed and ate like it had always known hunger. These were not exonerations. They were pieces of fabric that complicated the evidence, softening the edges without changing the core facts. They made it harder for me to be purely procedural, which was the point at which law stops being a machine and becomes a moral instrument. The prosecution was thorough in a way that felt eager, polished in a way that wanted applause. Their case was a sculpture of certainty. The press wanted quotes that fit into headlines and neighbors wanted parade routes for condemnation. My role was not to rebut the sculpture with a new one, but to be honest about the size of the blow and advocate for an outcome that measured punishment against the life behind the crime. That measurement required bargaining, which in court is a form of calculus that always includes human collateral. We negotiated a plea because life with trial hinged on too many variables for a man whose child needed the smallest remnants of normality. Darren wanted to stay connected to his son in the narrow ways the law would allow. He wanted to preserve a home address on a piece of paperwork so that mail would not become a mystery for the child who still liked dinosaur stickers. The prosecutor wanted a conviction that would not be criticized by angry parents and editorial boards. I wanted less for myself than what the case seemed to demand, a quieter hunger for mercy that tried to look like reason. In the courtroom, I spoke in paragraphs crafted to shape consequences rather than rewrite truth. I explained the unglamorous facts of a life that had not been privileged by choices and circumstance. I did not plead innocence. I argued for an outcome that did not pretend the state's power was without limits. The judge listened with a worn attention that belonged to someone familiar with human failure. When the sentence came, it was not the end of the story, but a reconfiguration of it into terms that could be navigated. Walking Darren out of the courthouse felt like leading a man through a doorway into a future that had already been mapped by other hands. People watched from the steps because punishment is a communal spectacle. Some mouthed words that matched the veneer of righteous disgust. Others kept distance the way neighbors keep distance from a house with a burned roof. Darren folded into the space allowed to him with a dignity that had more to do with survival than pride. There were nights after the case closed when I sat at my kitchen table with the file at my elbow and the city breathing outside. I would look at a child's drawing that Darren had given me before he was taken away, a truck with bright wheels and a sun that was slightly lopsided. The drawing was small and stubborn evidence of other truths that do not fit into indictments. It reminded me that representing someone who is obviously guilty is not a betrayal of truth, but a refusal to let certainty become a blunt instrument that erases complexity. The work did not make me virtuous. It made me tired and careful. It taught me that law is less about vindication and more about preserving the fragments that let people keep being people on the other side of punishment. I carried Darren's file back into my office and placed the drawing on top. It was a quiet thing to look at between cases, a reminder that the people who come through my door are not character studies, but chest-sized collections of loss and luck and little kind. And that part of the work is to make sure the system knows how to measure every one of them.